are now arriving in Detroit. Once again, this is Detroit Woodward Street Station.
Hey guys, I'm Nick Weise with Rightsize Facility, and welcome to our Michigan Showroom and Design Center.
We all want the same amenities. You want the same thing for your kid that I'm going to want for my kid one day, Lord willing.
And then, what we can't find a home for, we recycle.
And thank you for riding Amtrak.
Cool. So welcome to the Weise Weekly Wrap-Up, where we talk about architecture, design, everything in between. I got a reoccurring guest here. We haven't caught up in a few years. I'll let you introduce yourself. Go ahead.
For sure. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So again, Daniel A. Washington, founder and executive director, NW Goldberg Cares, community development organization on the west side, home to Motown Museum, Lee Plaza, Marble Bar, a couple awesome great places in Detroit. So yeah,
nice.
Proud to be here. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. I mean, when I was looking for space of where to host, I looked up the old podcast that we did. And it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, time flies.
That time flies.
Yeah, time flies.
And really quick, shout out to Nick and the Rightsize team. As Daniel mentioned, we are in Metro Detroit area, so we want to give a shout out to our host and stay tuned for later to talk about a little bit more about Rightsize as well. So yeah, 2 years ago we caught up. We were talking about a whole bunch of things, but I mean, recap us. Tell what's been going on past 2 years.
Man, life happens fast. So yeah, it's been 2 years since we last sat down.
You got sweaters now, obviously.
I had sweaters on too. Don't come for me like that.
But
no, I'm just joking.
You did have a sweater. I only got like a medium.
Yes, you're right. So we got these brand new fresh sweaters. They're really to commemorate our new project, Winter Wonderland. That's going to be birthed out of the Curtis Jones Park. Shout out to those who made it, including yourself, to our grand opening. That was late last month. These, we just, wanted to do something simple, essentially white crew neck with our logo on it, just to feel good, and just something fresh. So we only dropped about 12 of these. They've already sold out. I went ahead and made an emergency, decision to help you out with one, but we ain't gonna talk about that. But all in all, just the last 2 years has just been amazing, man. We've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of impact, which I figured and I assumed, but I am humbled at what's next for us, right? And I know we're going to get into that a little later, but when I think about 2 years ago, it was wrapping my head around where we'd be at today, and we've been able to hit those milestones, which is exciting. So
yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot to unpack on that. I mean, I guess just off of that, Curtis Jones Park is about how big?
Curtis Jones Park is a 13,000 square foot active lifestyle park. So it's still a pocket park, though, believe it or not. So it used to be a bowling alley, and I tell people all the time who go visit it that, believe it or not, for us it's a pocket park because it's still one parcel. It used to be a bowling alley from alley to street, and they tore it down well before I was even born. So it hasn't been a parking or it hasn't been a bowling alley for a long time. But we were able to acquire from the Detroit Land Bank, and we were able to just really activate and transform that thing to something beautiful. And, those who haven't been there, you're talking about a full NBA-sized basketball court, 6 hoops and backboards. You're talking about a walk path for anybody of any age or abilities, and you're talking about a playground. So you're not just talking about basketball. You're not just talking about a playground. You're talking about a combination, which is why we consider an active lifestyle park. Yeah,
for sure. And there's so much, so many ways I want to talk or ask you about that experience. I definitely recommend everybody checking it out via the socials and everything. But I guess, what has the experience been like? Obviously, the Rest and Ride or the Holland Maze, I guess, do you take things that you've learned from something like that, the scale, right? Like, how transferable is that experience? And I'm sure you've learned a lot. You have a lot more vendors. Obviously, it's a bigger thing. You have obviously some great sponsors donating some money, some good dollars to something like CJ Park. So, and it's going by CJ Park?
Yeah, CJ. We call this the CJ.
CJ, gotcha.
So I would say yes, it's all transferable in a lot of ways, right? So the things that you have to do a small park, you'll have to do for a big park. That starts with fundraising. Well, it starts with a vision. Let's start there.
Starts with the vision. Starts with the rendering. If anybody needs a rendering, reach out to
Weise. Shout out to Weise and Dale for helping us. Also, shout out to Wade Trim, a neighbor in the neighborhood.
He did the
he did the initial a conceptual rendering just to get us a concept, really to understand what we could do with that space. Because again, it wasn't about just a basketball court, and it wasn't just about a playground. It was about both and making them both fit, right? So you got to start with the vision, and then after that, it's about fundraising. So that's the part that I tell people is always going to come with its most ups and downs, right? Because you're going to reach out to somebody, anybody, and say, hey, can you support this great project? Let me tell you why. And they're going to come up with a yes or an excuse as why they can say no, right?
Yeah.
And you got to be willing to go back to the well, whether that be them with more time passing, or you got to find new people that are willing to potentially hear your story. So I think from that standpoint, those things are transferable in any park, in any space that you create in Detroit, especially under the guise of like a nonprofit, which we are. But then you got to move outside of that and really start to think about, how do I make this the most maximized, enjoyable space for everybody? And I think that's where being agile and understanding that the space in some ways speaks for itself, and it isn't necessarily with all these preconceived notions and just trying to fit everything in. So I'll give you a good example of that. When you think about our space, you probably remember when you were there, you had the basketball court, and then you had this walk path that was kind of around it, right? Mm-hmm. So initially our thought was, okay, we'll have a walk path that partially goes around it and primarily goes around the playground. And the thought we have toward that is to say, hey, if a mom is there and she wants to walk a mile and she wants her kid to be able to play safely and she wants to keep their eye on them, it makes sense to have this walk path that walks around the playground. But then you start to think about it more. You're like, okay, if somebody's coming out there with no kid and they're just coming out by themselves, they want to be able to enjoy the entire space for what it is and what it has to offer. So we've went ahead, and even like literally happening right now today, we have an additional walk path or section of the walk path being poured that initially wasn't planned for. And we were able to make it fit. And that's cool because now we have a little bit more space for people to enjoy, right? It makes the space a little bit more optimal. And I think that only comes with being agile and not being so, it has to be the way it was on this rendering, or it has to be the way it was on construction drawings, but being agile enough to say, okay, this is how it's going to fit. And then the same thing, we had setback requirements that kind of nix some of what we initially thought we had, but then you make up for it in other areas. And you just want to consistently and continuously be agile and look at the functionality of a space and let that space kind of speak to you. So
the setbacks usually like hiccup everybody, right? And especially, and I know you were talking about some new property and buildings, and parking is another huge one that you have to account for, that really kind of blows up developments if you don't have the ability to go up or to spread out. So that's pretty interesting. And the fundraising thing is also interesting because it's all about timing, I feel, right? Like we're in December right now, and or coming up in December, and a lot of sometimes the funds are already allocated, right? So you may have to wait until the new fiscal year, depending on whenever the fiscal year is for the companies, and that timing is important. And also the presentation, I always feel like you're saying, like if you send a deck to someone and it has the information, what does it look like? What are the visuals? And right now, the way that visuals can really portray, you even take a look at like video games and shit like that. Like they're so realistic, right?
Yes.
And I want to applaud the like artistic rendering, similar to what I saw for the CJ. That really allows it more interpretation, right? And that flexibility. For sure.
So I'm not gonna lie, like my marketing and branding background has definitely assisted in our ability to get cool things done in a short amount of time, and I don't take it for granted. Like I tell people all the time, especially who reach out, I'm like, hey, can you help me? I got this nonprofit I'm trying to start, or I have an idea for a nonprofit. As I tell them, like, listen, start with a strong brand, right? Name matters, but again, you can name anything for the most part, as long as you can communicate what that name is and people can get it after seeing it and being acquainted with it. Then most parts it can still work, but your branding is key. And then photography, I know that we're in the video world, and I do think that video, even now being recorded, it's like video has a real important role. But I do think that visuals that are even as basic as a good photo that's edited and consistent goes a long way that a lot of people don't think about. So from that standpoint, it was everything from communicating why. We're kind of alluding to it, but I'll just put out there, this took 2 years of fundraising, intentional fundraising during the middle of a pandemic at that, right? Where they said, who cares about what's going on outside? Stay indoors, right? That just shows you that you can do some pretty cool and impressive things, but it does come with the level of determination and dedication and storytelling that ultimately you got to make that decision very early on, or you're going to be floundering, right? And even then, I think about this, which again, a lot of people don't know, but when we initially started this, it was only a $300,000 budget, right? After the pandemic, that thing ballooned to about $420,000. Well, what happens then, right? You got to go back to those same funders. You got to find new funders. So that's also part of the fundraising, because that is not one of those things where it's like you fundraise, you celebrate the fundraiser, you break ground. It's like life happens. Life happens to you fast. So whoever could have anticipated the pandemic was going to come in the middle of this thing and make, lives a lot more difficult, right? Or make supply chain a lot more, difficult to navigate. So I think from that standpoint, that's where the things like branding and storytelling and really having a consistent message that people can understand and get behind really just shines the most.
Yeah, for sure. It's the brand having a brand is huge, right? Yeah, man. I mean, that's a lot of fucking hard work, dude.
Yeah.
Tip of the cap for sure, because it's people don't really understand. I mean, you never really know unless you do it, right?
Yeah.
And not too many people do it.
Correct.
Whether it's start your own thing, do something like this, fundraising, like you could try to explain to someone, but they don't know. They can't relate, right?
This is about the now tell me into like the whole gatekeeping thing, right? I do. I think that not only is it hard to explain, but it's very much so about what can I do individually to make sure that what has been created is the knowledge of how to do it is accessible, and it doesn't always have to come from my mouth solely. And I think that that's something that I'm very, very passionate about, as a black man, and then B, as a kid who has had to overcome so many barriers to do things I've been able to do, is that I never want to look at the information or the things that I've been able to do and hoard them for myself, because what good does that do, right? If somebody has a vision or a desire, I don't care what neighborhood, I don't care if it's East Side, I don't care if it's in St. Clair Shores. If you have a vision, I'll give you a quick story. So we had a potential funder, I won't mention a name just out of respect to them, but they were telling me that, at the time that they were interested in supporting our work, they were telling me how a kid in a suburb was very passionate about a sports program that they wanted to create, but they didn't have a nonprofit. They didn't have pretty much anything that was needed for this potential funder to give them money. But the kid talked to their parents, and again, this kid was like 10 years old or younger. They talked to their parents, told them what their vision was, and got all their stuff together. And believe it or not, that organization ended up giving that kid money. And what I'm basically saying by that is, like, I don't care where you're from, I don't care who you are, what you look like. I know that what I've been able to do and what I've been blessed to be able to do is accessible and should be accessible, and it shouldn't only come from my mouth. So one thing that I'm passionate about right now is how do we create a system or create a platform to allow for the awesome projects that's happening around the state that gets any philanthropic dollars to be accessible to anybody at the click of a button, right? So it doesn't matter, again, if you are a person in rural Michigan saying, hey, I want to build this cool basketball court because there's kids in our neighborhood or kids in our area that don't have access to a basketball court, you can go on this website, maybe it's goodprojects.com or .org, and you can literally find a synopsis about that project, the budget that it took to get it done, some of the potential funders that supported it, right? Because these funders want to see replicable projects that also have some sustainability component to it, and they can envision doing that themselves. And I think that that's important, right? When I talk to a lot of my funders, I tell them, I say, listen, you guys only want to deal with sustainable projects anyway. So instead of reinventing the wheel, where so many nonprofits are looking to recreate the Curtis Jones Park in their neighborhood, why not make that information accessible, right? And then they start to think like, wow, I never thought about that. And then I charge them to myself and I say, listen, despite my intention, I have to acknowledge that if I'm not available for somebody to pick up the phone call or to share with them, I'm contributing to a problem of gatekeeping information. And again, a lot of people shy away from that. Like, well, that's a negative word. Damn right is negative, right? Like if you're gatekeeping resources and access, then no matter what the reason is, no matter why it's happening, right? It could just be limited availability or access. What can we do to deconstruct that and make that no longer a barrier for people? And I'm really passionate about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge, that's big. Mm-hmm. Because it comes down to dollars, yo. It's all about dollars, right?
Access.
It's all about dollars. Yeah. It's all about access. That information that you have, that not everybody's like you, right? And not everybody's willing to get that information for free, right? To use something as a benchmark and to understand that, because there's people out there with bad intentions, quite frankly,
100%,
right?
100%.
And so if they're like, oh, okay, well, it took him $4,300 to build this, mm-hmm. right? Okay, well then maybe I'll charge you whatever, $250 or whatever the initial mm-hmm. price was, right? And then it's just it's all about dollars. But I do think that gatekeeping is a thing, right?
But so shout out to Phyllis at Bridging Communities. I think this is the mindset though, is we have to stop putting profit over people, right? And I think that we have to understand that we all want the same things. We all want the same amenities. You want the same thing for your kid that I'm going to want for my kid one day, Lord willing, right? And I think that what we have to do is we have to understand that within these budgets and within this work that's being done, yes, there is money or there is a piece of the pie to be broken off to people who can do certain things. And you have to rest in that, right? So there's this balance again of if you make this thing transparent, right? And you really make it about people instead of profit, then the profit will still exist. I'm not telling you eliminate profit. I'm not telling you that, there's no need for an architect. There's not a need for a structural engineer. There's not a need for, a masonry guy. I'm just saying that make it plain so that everybody understands how do you make more successful projects instead of a lot of stop start and struggles and attempting to do something positive, right? Because what good does that do? If a kid comes to me or if a person comes to me right now and say, Daniel, I want you to replicate the Curtis Jones Park. And I'm like, okay, that's going to cost you $500,000. And they're like, well, I don't have that much money. And I'm like, I know, but aspire to do that, right?
Yeah.
Who did it really serve? It didn't serve me.
Right.
As a consultant, it didn't serve that neighborhood who didn't get that.
Right.
What served that community and serve that, that kid or that individual who aspires to do that is to actually say, this is the blueprint. This is the game plan and get it done.
So what if Spalding came to you? And was like, how much you Spalding's basketball?
Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. Shout out Spalding. I didn't know what that was.
What if they came to you and they were like, how much did it cost for your thing? Right. Yeah. Now I'm saying that Spalding has a lot more different resources, and now you're giving them that fucking game plan. Excuse my language. You're giving them my own thing. You're giving them that game.
Kids don't do this at home.
Yeah. No, you're giving them that game plan that they can implement not only in Detroit.
Correct.
Right? They can implement it in
anywhere
from Memphis to LA or wherever. Right.
Yes.
And I guess that is where it's tough because not everybody. Why should we be the ones that don't gatekeep when there's other people out there who will be continue to gatekeep and take that profit?
I can't worry about that though.
Yeah.
See, now you're worrying about something that I'm telling you right now. If I'm worrying about what Cindy, Lou, and John is doing, I ain't focusing on what God has placed in my heart and has commissioned me to do. And I think that that's the thing that, again, you can inundate yourself with all these things. You can inundate yourself with all the bad in the world, and you can. And don't get me wrong, there's a place and space for that, right? Mm-hmm. But what I've found and what I've realized in my 29 years of living, right? And I didn't get this all the way. I was you know me, I can be cynical. I get the next guy. I can be a realist. I call myself a realist when I can admit that for some people it's being cynical, it's being negative, right? Mm-hmm. But what I can say is that you cannot do that because ultimately, you're right, it's going to happen anyway. But what can we do to change the narrative in whatever spaces we're in, right? With whoever we influence and impact and say, it's for us to try to change the tide on this. To your point, how can we get corporations to say, this makes sense? Yeah. It's not this mystical thing that happened in Northwest Goldberg that is not replicable, that can't be done again. Yeah, it can. Yeah. If you're a corporation and you want to do good in the community and you're sports adjacent, 5 companies can come together, pony up $400,000, and guess what? Another Curtis Jones Park adjacent could be built in another neighborhood, right? That's the kind of conversation I want to have. I don't want to have the conversation about, well, this kid Daniel is so unique and so different and charismatic and he can change, the lives of people because they believe in him.
He's a great personality.
It shouldn't be about that. It should be about there's a need.
Yeah.
There's people who are willing to work on the ground to make this need be met.
Yeah.
Let's figure out who can make this need no longer be unaddressed.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what I want to focus on.
Sure.
I don't want to focus on how great you or how cool you think I am or how much I work, how hard I work. Because ultimately, I'm being honest with you, let's talk about legacy now. Let's transition the conversation. You got a little one at home.
Yeah.
What is the legacy in that?
Yeah.
There's no legacy in Daniel Washington going down as this guy who created 25 parks in the neighborhood, but nobody else could replicate that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. I mean, you got a really solid foundation of what you're doing, man. And it's. I mean, talk about legacy. I don't even know what the word beyond legacy is. dynasty, I guess. I mean, you just have a lot of shit going on, yo. You got the foundation, man. I truly believe it for sure. And what was your experience like with the capital partners, or like that whole like that, because that adds to your.
Well, now it's Momentous Capital, for the record. They got bought out as Momentous Capital, but Momentous Capital. But shout out to the folks at Capital Impact that came over to Momentous Capital. It was an amazing program. I'll tell you that. It's like everything in life. It is what you put into it. At the end of the day, it's not some magical wand that all of a sudden now I got access to millions of dollars. I'm not going to lie. I did go in kind of thinking like, oh, I'll graduate from this program and I'll have access to dollars. It's not that. But what it is it is an extended network that I didn't have that now gives me a sense of vision and purpose as it relates to development. Yeah. One thing I called you like first 2 weeks in, I'm like, listen, I am not a developer, and a lot of my counterparts in this space who call themselves developers are not developers. We're rehabbers, we're flippers, and that's okay. But I want to be a developer, and I know now what it takes to be a developer. I'm going to learn now what it takes to be a developer. So again, shout out to those people at Momentous Capital, because I think Capital Impact at the time, it was called that. It gave me so much needed knowledge and skill set to know what I'm talking about as it relates to development. And I think another thing that it did that I'm really grateful for is it put in perspective what it takes when you see those cranes in the sky dropping, materials, and you see a building go up, right? I think for so many people, kind of like to the park scenario, is so many people see these things and they just think they just happen. They think it's this, right? I just snapped my finger for those, who might be listening and not watching. It's just a matter of instant. It's just instant. It's not instant. This is not instant oatmeal. This ain't instant popcorn. This is literally the work of potentially tens, if not hundreds of people that are working in concert to make something that you just look at, or somebody might look at and say, that's a building that went up yesterday. That's a neighborhood that went up yesterday. That's a house that just got rehabbed to the degree of a full transformation, but don't really understand that it ultimately led to a lot of hard work that went into it. And I think that is what I got the most out of this, is that, you got to start with a pro forma. You got to know how to scale those stuff that you're trying to do. That's not only scaling the numbers, but scaling the impact, which I think is also important, right? So when you think about affordability, when you think about, a multi-unit building, how much is that is going to be market rate versus affordable? Will there even be any part of it being affordable? That stuff matters, and that stuff really impacts lives. It's not just about making the numbers make sense to gain a profit. That's an important part of it, and that plays a role. But actually, how do you look at the landscape of a neighborhood or a community or a project and say, hey, how is this going to impact some lives? Yeah,
and it takes that time, right? It takes just a lot of time. Even with CJ Park, I know they had the challenge of COVID and stuff like that, but the time that it takes, that's why these developments take forever, right? And there's so many people, and do you have the funds to even last that long, right?
Exactly.
I know for a small team like us, we have some potential projects. We worked on some potential projects down on the south side of Chicago, and some of these efforts just take so much, and us being a smaller team, like we try to absorb it as much as we can, and we're transparent with the clients, like saying, hey, we can do this much, but typically this is why, and again, it's education, right? Typically this is why it goes to a larger firm, because they can absorb all of this work.
Correct.
They can pump out these renderings, pump out all these feasibility studies, all this shit, right? And just being that transparent, I think, is super important, right? Like they're willing to work with you, you're willing to work with them, and that's how you help that community grow, right? You help these projects grow, which is a wild thing. And I guess hopping on a lighter note, I know a big component that you're super proud of is the artist collaboration for CJ. How was that? How did that even?
Man, it was amazing.
Because we worked on a few things back even before when you were trying to find that out. Yeah.
So, I will say this. I will say that, for me, I've been blessed to be able to utilize social media as a literal tool, not just a social thing, right? So when you think about, harkening back to my days with Detroit Dough, I used Twitter to land our first, manufacturing or if you want to call it, large client that was going to order dough at a rate that was worth talking about. Shout out Imagine and our time at Detroit Dough. I was able to do the same thing with Instagram, right? I was able to use Instagram to connect with Bisco Smith, an amazing, talented artist out of Lisbon now, him and his beautiful family, wife and kid. And it was just about communicating the story and the message and why his art connected to me and how I thought it could connect to our community. And I think that, what ended up coming out of it was just beautiful, right? You had, backboards, a tough shed, the actual physical court being painted, and just really being able to meet somebody who from afar looked like he was always doing cool stuff, right? But then to realize in person, his personality, his demeanor was just as cool as his artwork, right? Like the guy was just laid back. I mean, kicked into my house for a month, was just really a humble dude. This guy, whether he believes or not, he is somebody who to me is shaking the art industry. I mean, he's taking something as, if you want to call it basic or as grungy or as, urban as graffiti, and making it some high-end, high-valued art, right? And I think that for me, it was really important to not, and I know this is something that, a lot of people might not even know, but, again, going back to who I am, you see it. I'm black. I'm a black man, right? It was something that weighed on my heart to say, am I doing a disservice to my community to not have a local black Detroit artist, right? And I would literally argue with, board members or funders and say, listen, it's not about that on this project, right? It's about inspiring, first off. Then secondly, it's about what could choosing this art and this artist do for my community, right? For accessibility's sake. And I think that ultimately we did just that. I don't know one person for the most part, except for some haters that I won't mention, who thought that the art wasn't appropriate and uplifting in a way that you just couldn't have gotten, right? By just taking the route of gotta go black, gotta go Detroit. And again, some people might give me flack hearing this just now, and I don't care, right? Yeah. I was very inspired and intentional with picking an artist who I felt like came with a certain amount of cachet, came with a certain look, and really giving people the real about, this is an investment. This was not a hand-me-out. This was not a solely just a simple transaction of, hey, we're a nonprofit, we're going to do this for bare minimum. Like, no, this is a significant investment that required fundraising, that required intentionality, that required negotiation to say, hey, this is the artist that we want. This is his rates. He's willing to do this to support it. But at the same time, he has to get paid. And ultimately, we are now here in Northwest Goldberg, home to a significant investment that has value, right? That speaks to, we deserve nice shit. Excuse me, Mom. Sorry, I'm gonna cuss a little bit. I say this all the time. Black people deserve nice shit. Yeah. Why are we subjected to taking tires? I've said this in the last podcast 2 years ago. Why is it that the narrative out here is that our kids deserve hand-me-down, play equipment? Why do our kids deserve throwaway stuff that other cities are looking at and saying, hey, we don't really want that? We deserve nice stuff. When you come to our basketball court, I want you to say, this is the best basketball court in the state of Michigan. Yeah. Public basketball court in the state of Michigan.
Did you mention that it's a full-size NBA?
Yeah, I mentioned that a couple times. Cool. I'm going to keep bragging about it. Full-size NBA basketball court. You know what I mean? But no, we deserve nice stuff. I think about my 6-year-old niece. Big inspiration for a lot of stuff that I do. She deserves to be proud of where she comes from, right? For sure. Her neighborhood that's home to an art piece that's bigger than houses in your neighborhood. And when I say your neighborhood, you know what I'm talking about. Not in in your neighborhood. Where you enjoy the lap luxury of a $500,000-$600,000 house. There's a basketball court in her neighborhood that has art that's bigger than your house. That's huge. That's important. And I think that for me, it's just embedded in me to attempt to raise the level of awareness and the level of dignity of my people. And I'm just not going to apologize for that, right? I really think that, a lot of people look at the work that I do and they say, it is so amazing to see these public spaces being transformed, and it is. But what gets me off, quote unquote, or what gets me more excited is knowing that I'm changing the mindset of my community to say, this is something that I want to uphold. This is something that I want to nurture. This is something that I want to protect. This is something that I want to be telling people who aren't here about. And I think that we're doing that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. We're about to end this podcast. No. Well, and what was your trip on Denver? Not on that large scale, but I mean, things that you...
New Orleans?
What's I do want to talk about New Orleans. Okay. But you said you were out in Denver month for an art thing or something.
Yeah. I went out to Denver for an art show to support Brett Kern. It was an amazing time. That That was just on some art stuff, man. You know, I'm a nerd. I'm weird. You know what I mean? My
dope.
dinosaurs, my astronauts, and other weird dinosaurs.
But you haven't been down to Basel yet.
No, I wanted to go. It was one of those situations where it just didn't make sense timing wise. But, I got to go out there. I did go to Miami, though. I did go to Miami.
Cool.
And I did pass Wynwood. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
It was an amazing, from afar, from the freeway. It was an amazing spot that just looked like every inch was covered in art. Yeah. But no, I haven't been to Art Basel.
Yeah, we should take a trip down there for sure. But yeah, talking about community and talking about where people are from, right, and taking pride in that. New Orleans, how was that trip, and how did you even like get selected to go down there and all that jazz? I know it was kind of a process too, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, no, whatever. We'll talk about it. But long story short, I'm a part of a cohort called Merging CDO Firm. Shout out Enterprise, Brianna, and some other great folks down there.
Emergency what?
Emerging CDO. Emerging CDO Fund.
Okay.
CDO Fund. I'm part of a cohort. Shout out to Enterprise and some other awesome funders like Ford Foundation and Kresge. Ford Foundation, Kresge, Ralph C. Wilson, and some others who have been generously supporting the work of NW Goldberg Cares. But yeah, they flew us out to New Orleans for about a week to really understand what community development look like in New Orleans, right? New Orleans, if you don't know, a very, very rich in Black history in terms of just the plight of Blacks coming to America. And, I'll just cut to the chase and just say, for me, it was a very, very sombering and sad experience, at least for me as a Black man, right? And again, most people I went with were Black. And I think that a lot of people echo my sentiments is that, it is just rooted in such horrific history for Blacks. When you talk about slavery and then you fast forward to Hurricane Katrina, I will say that, I can't leave that place with the same false impressions that I had going in, right? I thought it was going to be a city of, fun and excitement and great food. And again, the food was great. And, those things I'm sure exist in some type of realm. Yeah. But for me, the lens that I went down there with, it just was really humbling and really sad in some ways to just hear the stories, right? Of my people and what they've experienced in that land and in that soil in that area. And I just feel like, again, it's one of those things that it's still today rooted in so much racism, right? When you think about the downtown being so white and the other areas around it being so Black and poverty. You talk about kind of similar to Detroit, the decimation of a Black neighborhood where there's a freeway there, and now they're trying right now to reclaim the underpass to be something to really uplift Black small businesses. I mean, it's no different than 375, right? There's a lot of parallels between Detroit actually and New Orleans. So I think for me, it was just taking that all in and really understanding, what could I do to play a positive role back home. Yeah. And then even in my travels moving forward, how can I really look at it from the community development lens to see, okay, the displacement of people, how that actually transcends lives and negatively impact lives. And then even the work that I'm doing, I get asked all the time, like, do you think that you're contributing or playing a role to gentrification of your neighborhood? And I tell people, I don't, at the end of the day. And that's not to me delusion. That is actually me speaking factually from the standpoint of my neighborhood could hold anywhere between 10 to 12,000 people. It's home around 2,000 people. What are we talking about here, right? I need residents in my area. Like, I can't keep justifying, the lack of population in my area, especially with some of the things that, I aspire to do, whether that be development or just, again, building public spaces. So I know I have to sit at night and I have to, go to bed knowing that, yes, am I changing the landscape of my neighborhood? Sure. Am I, creating things that are attractive to more than just people that live there? Yes, undoubtedly, right? You build a public space, you build, a basketball court. If you like basketball, no matter where you live, you're going to want to come and play on that court. I get that. Yeah. But I don't think that any stretch of imagination that I am gentrifying my area. I think, if anything, I am ushering in the normalization of a better and more quality lifestyle, right? And I think that that's something that we have to be able to distinguish and really be honest about, and stop just being lazy and saying, oh, we're gentrifying. If anything new happens in the area, we're gentrifying the area. I think gentrification can come from this. I will admit that. I think that I have to be on top of things and ahead of things to make sure that it doesn't happen. But for sure, to be clear, no, I don't think I'm gentrifying my neighborhood.
And I think other people they have just the same I guess, freedom to move into the neighborhood
Yes.
as people who are gentrifying it. You
Correct.
know what I mean?
Correct.
And it's yeah, the New Orleans thing, it's huge, man. I mean, that's a great city, great town, but yeah, there's a lot of rich history for sure, rich history. And was that the point of the trip? Was to just kind of see
the parallels
like
and what they were doing on the ground level. And I think that, again, for me, it was just eternalizing that all and really realizing, like, yo, we've been through no, seriously, like, again, if you've never visited, and this is my opinion, I mean, everybody who I've had, former partner of mine, loves New Orleans, told me, she'd die there if she could, in terms of just like, as she ages. And I'm like, cool, that's dope. And I was going down and thinking, like, dope, like, I'm gonna feel love, but I really felt a deep, profound amount of sadness. That's what I've been saying, profound amount of sadness. I mean, when you talk about some of the traumas of my people and what we've experienced, I mean, you just think about slave catching and just, people running to the north from there and hoping for a better life. When you talk about Hurricane Katrina decimating neighborhoods, I mean, you're talking about we're driving in neighborhoods that look like Detroit but ain't Detroit. And the reason that it ain't Detroit is not because of the automotive industry and the mortgage crisis, but because of a man-made natural disaster, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I'm not here to be political. I'm not here to, make anybody feel better than the realities of what happened, right?
Yeah.
You have people that, lost their lives that ultimately is rooted in their blackness, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like you cannot sugarcoat. And I feel like, again, when you think about the commodity that New Orleans is, it is from a very, very tourism and let's have fun. And if you show your boobs, you get a bead. And if you go during a certain time of day, you're going to see black culture, personified to the degree. And that's great to a certain degree. Like that's great that's a part of it, But then I can also tell you the other side that I experienced, that Holly Grove, right? Or some of these things that, black culture has been known for, when you talk about the Hot Boys and everything that, Lil Wayne. That was decimated by Hurricane Katrina. Those neighborhoods don't exist. Those projects don't exist no more. And you can say, well, damn, they're projects. They shouldn't exist. But they got replaced with just other, projects. It's just that part of the culture that was left and going to be forgotten, right? And you fast forward in 20, 30 years, Holly Grove and what Lil Wayne talked about when I was growing up, and we was like Holly Grove anthem, Juvenile, it's like that stuff don't exist no more. And that's sad. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how you look at that and you don't be like, dang, that's kind of sad. You know what I mean? And I think that that's important to remember, is that, there's people who are there who in some ways have no ability to get relief because, again, we're inundated with day-to-day life. You know what I mean? It's no different than in Detroit. You're inundated with day-to-day life. I can't talk about what DT is and isn't doing. I can't talk about what the water department is or isn't doing when I'm worried about a leaky roof. I'm worried about, foundational issues, asbestos. I'm thinking about all these things. My kids get to school. I just think we got to sometimes like pump the brakes and realize that like people don't have the ability in most cases to really deal with some of these pressing issues in life because life is kicking them every which way. Yeah. And they need relief in that way, right? And again, I hate to sound so sad, but it's like, again, you think about what's going on right now across the board with, layoffs and the economy and interest rates going up. We're in a sad place right now in society. And I can recognize my privilege, brother. Like, listen, I might have built my stuff. And I built NW Goldberg Cares. And I got a salary and I got, an employee and I got, all my limbs and my health. But it is a sad time right now. And I think that we have to sometimes sit back, close our eyes, take a deep breath, and appreciate what we have. Yeah, for sure. And stop being so inundated with what else can we do? What other side hustle can we add to the table? What else can we sell? What else can we do? Because ultimately, like, none of this stuff going with us. Yeah. To be very clear, none of this stuff going with us. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the billionaire or you're the kid who only got $100 in your pocket. Right. When it's your time, when that curtain call happens, none of this gonna matter. Yeah. Right. So
I meant to say Apple Eagle with Lil Wayne and the Hot Boys. Mm-hmm. But really quick, just I want to bash. There's a show on Showtime called Your Honor, and it's set in New Orleans. It's a fucking horrible show, man. Really? It really the racism in it is just I could not.
Is it horrible because it's really reflective of what New Orleans is, or is it horrible because it's just like they just do a bad job? And I'm just asking because I'm always gonna challenge.
Yeah, it's great question. I think both.
Okay, because if it's true to what has happened and what is happening in New Orleans, I think that's a great thing because it needs to be depicted. It needs to be shown. Because I don't think Felix, I'll just say this. I genuinely do not think people understand how deep-seated even today racism is in New Orleans. Like when you look at their small business district and you look at downtown, it is staunch white, bro. And it is sick that it's like you go downtown and even when we talk about people who visit, it's like, yeah, New Orleans is amazing. Even we was at the Four Seasons, bro.
Yeah.
I know why. I know the reason why. And there's no shade. Enterprise did what they did. It was great. We're at the Four Seasons. When I tell you it was so pretentious being in the Four Seasons. Yeah. Nothing but white. And I'm talking about these people with big, long money. Yeah. There's a reason for that, bro.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
no, it was bad because it's just like, sure, like it depicts the racism, but there's no like flip of that coin. There's no turn for, oh, okay, well maybe this person's gonna get his. It's like, no, like it's just bad.
Yeah, but
like, and maybe that is
that is what it is, bro. What it is. I mean, that is what it is.
But it's like, I was shocked that Bryan Cranston like fucking took that role because of how like I was just
how overt it is though.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing and I'm like, damn, like it's bad. But
I would say they pushing it. People acting like it's hot. Yeah, people acting like it's hot. But again, I just feel like again, and that's what I'm saying is like I just don't think people realize that even today, the lingering effects of slavery in that area is that part of our nation. It ain't changed, bro. Yeah. I mean, you're still talking about like for the most part, blacks in New Orleans for the most part are simply in roles that are in servitude in some ways, whether that be hospitality, whether that be somebody who's cooking or at a fast food, or you're talking about just run of the mill jobs. But in leadership, man, you talking about it's still rooted in that, man. Yeah.
That's wild. Want to let her know what's up with the 2023. What's some goals? What's
yeah, man. It's gonna be a big year. It's gonna be a big year. Yeah, it's gonna be a big year. First and foremost, we got 1,000 square foot building donated to us off Ferry Park, which is an area of interest for us or a corridor of interest for us. We're really excited because we got some great funding opportunities that we're gonna be applying for. Of course, nothing is guaranteed, but we really feel good about it. We think that we can land some of these and we'd be able to rehab and finish the building by the end of next year, if not earlier than that, by halfway through the year. So that's one thing. And then, you think about some other stuff that we got on tap is finishing some houses and selling them, right, at market value and establishing the value in our area, right? We're no stranger as an area and really as a city of Detroit that we get depressed values, unfortunately. The banks don't want to give us the real support. They don't want to acknowledge that there's value in these neighborhoods. And we can, speculate on as to why for those who want to do that and who think that it's needed to be speculated, or we can just call it what it is, right? It's because of black and brown lives. It's because of black and brown ownership. And it's just one of those things that we have to do our part as a CDO and as a community development organization to say, hey, we're going to fight for this value and we're going to tell you what it is. We're not about to keep asking you to see it as we see it. We're going to demand that you see it as we see it. So that's exciting. We already have one of the homes pre-sold. Nice. Shout out to the young couple that'll be moving into our area soon. And then we got another house that'll be getting completed soon. And then, between you and I, or between whoever listens to this, I'm looking to sell my house. You know what I mean? Yeah. And a part of it is not for anything more than to really increase the comps that are in my area. So, my labor of love will be on the market probably come 2023. So that'd be interesting. I'll find myself in a new space, but it's just really to make sure I put my mouth where my money, put my mouth, all that in the same area, right? Yeah. I want it all in the same area because it's important that people understand that, you can only change this thing. And kind of goes, that's what I said about earlier. You can only change this thing by worrying about you and what you're contributing to the pot, right? Can't worry about what Johnny doing. I can't worry about him taking the cookie out that I put in last night, right? If you take that cookie out, hopefully next time I can put 2 cookies in. And that's what I got to focus on. And that's what I am focusing on, is just that kind of mindset and changing that mindset for myself and for others around me. But 2023 is going to be an amazing year. 2022 has been pretty good to me, pretty good to the organization overall. But I'm just looking for really turning the corner here and scaling us up from that grassroots organization to more or less that organization that is bound for not only sustainability, but for continued change and impact. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And where can people follow you, or where can they follow the story? You or Northwest Goldberg?
Yeah, so personally, I'm on Instagram at DAW_Washington, stand like George Washington. And then, of course, the organization is just NW Goldberg Cares. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and then our website is www.nwgoldbergcares.com. Cool. And of course, we're always down for support, down for an email, just saying, hey, love the work that you're doing, and got a question about something that we're working on in our area. We always respond and try to help people where we can. Of course, I'm just going to say it now for those listening that we only can immobilize actual physical support in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, we can't, go and do work all over the place. As individuals we can, and that's cool, and I've always loved to support people in that way. But as it relates to the actual organization, nonprofit, we can only serve our area, right? And that's just something that's a part of our mission, and a part of why we exist is that, as a kid born and raised there, we need so much. I can only do so much, and I'm only going to do so much, and that's going to be within my neighborhood and my community. But just love to see all the happenings in Detroit and in my city, and how people are really being resilient. That word gets overused, but still resilient. People are being resilient and innovative, and bringing projects to the forefront that otherwise wouldn't be done if it wasn't for those people. So just shout out to you if you're out there doing some cool stuff. Shout out to you, Felix, in this podcast. This is amazing, brother. I'm always happy and honored to be able to be in your presence and just talk to you about the stuff that I got going on. So keep up the good work and kiss the little one for me, bro. Yeah,
for sure, man. And thank you again for coming on, and anything we could do to support. Obviously, this is a way of supporting, getting out the story, and just being more realistic, if you will, human, right? But thank you, man. I appreciate it. Good luck in 2023 too.
Thank you, bro. Likewise. Big thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for checking out the podcast with Daniel Washington. I wanted to take a moment to talk about our host and where we are today. So to do that, I will let him introduce himself.
Thank you, Felix. It was great having you and Daniel in the showroom today. I am Nick Weise with Rightsize Facility. Rightsize is a nationwide tech-enabled furniture dealer and facility services firm. Through our locations in Greater Chicago and Detroit, we plan, furnish, and service spaces for commercial clients nationwide.
Nice.
And we have a unique industry-leading blended solution where we provide premium pre-owned, remanufactured, and over 200 lines of new furniture for our clients to really hit any price point, timeline, or aesthetic. And, for us, the turnkey solution is so much more than just providing everything to our clients from floor to ceiling within the built environment, but also, really helping them move from A to B and decommission their previous space.
Yeah.
So our eco-friendly decommissioning team has decommissioned over 85 million square feet of space.
Damn.
And less than 5% of those assets have ended up in a landfill.
And really quick, can you give a background for those who may not know what decommissioning is?
Yes, absolutely. So especially since the pandemic, it's been an incredibly integral part of our business. But decommissioning is when a commercial tenant downsizes, closes their office, moves from one to another. Their lease usually requires them to empty everything out of the space and return it to brim swept condition. Sometimes that's just removing the furniture. Sometimes that's pulling all of the data cabling, technology, art, signage, everything off the walls, patching the walls. So our service provides all of those things to get them back to a point where they can turn that space back over to the landlord. Nice. And usually, or historically, that process has really involved just a lot of throwing things away. Mm-hmm. For us, it's really important as a very green company to make sure that we're doing this in an eco-friendly manner. So we're taking those assets and we're either pulling them into our warehouse and reselling them as is, refurbishing them, donating them to nonprofits and other entities, Furniture Bank of Chicago and Detroit, Habitat, and et cetera. Yeah. And then, what we can't find a home for, we recycle.
Gotcha.
So that's where, that statistic of less than 5% of all of those assets ending up in a landfill is something we're incredibly proud of.
Absolutely.
And we were able to provide our client with a certificate showing them how many tons of materials were kept out of a landfill, where those assets went. So sustainability is always on the precipice of our conversations in our world. But, once they can see that impactful number, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think a lot that thought often gets left behind. Some people don't think about, well, what happens to the furniture after it goes, and how does a company even handle that? Like that, obviously everybody's always interested in the new flashy, like nice furniture. I'm saying that they're going to receive, but there is a use for some of that decommissioning, even if it's a service or a product itself. So
absolutely, and especially over the past 3 years, those inventories of pre-owned furniture have gotten newer and newer because you have companies that might have furnished a space right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they're realizing that they can go largely remote, or they're completely adapting the way that they build out their space to accommodate a more collaborative environment because their employees can do heads down work at home. So we're decommissioning these seas of benching or cubicles and making way for collaboration spaces, entertainment spaces, gathering, and whatnot. So, the decommissioning world is coming from all different types of motivations of why they need to remove these things from the space.
Yeah.
But in many cases, it's beautiful premium furniture that we're able to provide to our customers, whether it's for the entire project or for just portions of the project to help them save money and find a good home for these items. And we just completed a 2 million square foot decommissioning for an insurance company in the suburbs of Chicago, and ended up with tens of thousands of workstations and chairs that we're able to repurpose. And it's a great story. It's premium furniture, and it allows us to really provide something to our clients quickly as well, because lead times, as you know, in the commercial furniture world are longer than ever. It's unprecedented.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So instead of a 12, 14, 16 week lead time, we can get them something immediately that is, in many cases, 10, 15 years newer than what they're moving out of.
Yeah, interesting. Well, great. And the space that we are in now is new as well?
Yes. So this is, as I mentioned, we have multiple locations in Greater Chicago and Detroit. This is our Detroit hub. We're in Southfield at Telegraph and Franklin. And it's our working showroom, our design center, and also gives us the ability to show off many of our 200 manufacturers, so our clients can kick the tires on products, do chair rodeos. We can show off some pre-owned items that we have long runs of. But it's really, for us, a gathering and entertaining space, some place where the commercial real estate and A&D communities can come and, pour a cup of nitro cold brew or iced tea on tap.
I saw that, yeah.
And just, use it as a resource, because we're kind of centrally located in the heart of Metro Detroit. We also have co-working spaces downtown and in Grand Rapids. Cool. And, just it's a place we're really proud of. We more than doubled our square footage in June when we opened this location. And it's a place to continue to grow in this market, because we're continuing to hire people. We brought 3 people onto the team last month.
Nice, congrats.
And we're continuing to build the Michigan location, because we don't just serve the local market, but clients nationwide. So from using technology and virtual presence and some traveling, we're able to serve our clients in every part of the country from this location and from Chicago. Yeah,
definitely. And in the Chicago and Detroit, the cross-pollination and neighboring markets, obviously we could have a whole another podcast on the differences between the two markets, but I think it's important, and I don't understand why more people don't do that. I do hear of a few people, design firms as well as other manufacturers, that do have that close neighboring thing, but thank you for always being, open to supporting what we do at Weise, and you're always a phone call away. I know that we did a few different presentations together, so I do appreciate that for sure.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. And where can people follow you? Or where can people follow Rightsize?
Sure. So we're Rightsize Facility on most social media channels: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We also have Rightsize Detroit on Instagram and Facebook. And then, for anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about Rightsize, I can be reached at Weise, NWEISE, at rightsizefacility.com.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you.